Welcome back to Reshaped by Loss, a place where grief, healing, faith, honesty, and hope come together. A place for the people carrying invisible pain, for the ones trying to survive loss while still learning how to live. Today is different. Today is a reflection, a pause, a look back at everything this season has held. This is our Season 1 recap. When this podcast first began, I didn't fully know where these conversations would lead. I only knew that there were things on my heart that I needed to speak out loud. I knew there were people suffering silently, asking questions that they were afraid to say out loud, and carrying grief they didn't know what to do with. And through every episode, every message, every conversation, one thing became clear. So many people are hurting, and so many people are trying to carry that pain alone. This season, we talked about community, grief, emotional wounds, loss, peace, healing, faith, isolation, and survival. In the podcast Finding Community, we talked about how healing was never meant to happen in isolation, how grief has a way of making us retreat inward, convincing us nobody understands, nobody can help, nobody could possibly carry the weight we feel. But something I learned this season through speaking with so many people is this: isolation may feel safer, but it often keeps people trapped. I remember one conversation that deeply stayed with me. A woman shared with me that it took her 40 years to finally begin dealing with her pain. 40 years. That's 4 decades of carrying grief, hurt, and emotional weight that never truly healed. And she looked at me and said, "I don't want that for you." That conversation sat heavily on my heart because I realized how many people live that way, surviving, functioning, existing, but never truly healing. And I remember telling her something that may sound difficult, but I believe it deeply. I told her maybe it took her that long because she was afraid to receive the peace God had for her. Because sometimes pain becomes familiar. Sometimes grief becomes intertwined with guilt. Sometimes letting go of suffering feels almost like letting go of the person we lost, or letting go of the love we carry for them. Some people become afraid that healing dishonors the memory of the person they lost. Others feel guilty for moments of joy. Others fear that if they stop hurting so deeply, they are somehow moving on. But peace and love can exist together. Healing and remembrance can exist together. You don't have to stay emotionally imprisoned to prove your love was real. And the more conversations I had this season, the more I heard similar things from different people. I heard, "I am not ready to go to grief counseling. I'm not ready to talk about it. I can't read books about grief. I'd rather stay busy. I don't want to think about it." And I began to ask myself difficult questions like, are people isolating themselves from healing? Are they avoiding grief because facing it feels too painful? Are some people surviving their grief but never truly confronting it? You know, Grief does not disappear simply because we avoid looking at it. Sometimes grief waits quietly in the background for years. It shows up in exhaustion, in anger, in anxiety, in emotional numbness, in broken relationships, in fear, in loneliness, and in the inability to feel peace. And sometimes people think they are healing simply because they can function, because they can go to work, smile in public, sit in rooms full of people, purchase books about healing, listen to podcasts, and post inspirational quotes. But deep down, you can still see the pain in their eyes. You can still hear it in their voice. You can still feel the heaviness they carry. Because there's a difference between distracting yourself from pain and actually healing from it. In the Why Me Part 1 and 2 podcast, we step into the raw questions grief brings. The questions that come with when faith and heartbreak collide. Why did this happen? Why this loss? Why my life? Why my child? And why this kind of pain? We talked about how why me is not a lack of faith. It is often the language of a broken heart trying to make sense of something that may never fully make sense. We made space for anger, for confusion, for silence, for wrestling with God without walking away from Him. And in the Sleeping in Peace podcast, we talked about the exhaustion grief creates, not just emotional, but physical and spiritual. The sleepless nights, the replaying thoughts, the inability to rest even when the body is tired. And yet we also spoke about the possibility of peace that meets you in the middle of the night when nothing else can quiet the mind. In the Grief Has a Voice episode, we gave language to what grief looks like in real life. It looks like tears, silence, anger, numbness, anxiety, memory longing, all different expressions of one shared pain. We acknowledged that grief that is not spoken often finds another way to speak. In the Brave Face We Wear episode, we talked about the mask people carry, the smiles that hide the suffering, the I'm okay that conceals breaking hearts, the strength that looks fine on the outside but feels heavy on the inside. We gave permission for honesty over performance. In the Emotional Wounds episode, we explored the invisible injuries people carry, the ones that shape how we love, trust, and protect ourselves, the wounds that often go unspoken but still deeply influence how we live. We talked about the courage it takes to finally name that hurt. In the Walk It Out episode, we talked about healing emotion, not rushing grief, not avoiding it, but choosing to keep going anyway, one step at a time, one breath at a time, one day at a time. Because sometimes healing begins simply by not giving up on yourself. And in the Loss Has a Way of Changing Us episode, we face the truth that loss transforms us. It shifts us, it reshapes us. We are not who we were before the loss, but we are still here, still standing, and still becoming. This season has been about holding two truths at once, and they are grief is real and healing is possible. Pain changes us, but it doesn't have to destroy us. And hope, even in its quietest form, is still alive. This season has been for the grieving, the questioning, the exhausted, the faithful, the angry, and the ones simply trying to survive what they never thought they would have to face. Thank you for listening. And if this podcast speaks to you, please click the subscribe button or the follow button so others can find it too. Take what spoke to you and leave the rest. Thank you for being here for season 1 of Reshaped by Loss. Wherever you are today, may you remember this. You are not alone. You are not forgotten, and your story is still unfolding. Until next time, this is Crystal, your host, encouraging you to keep walking, to keep healing, and keep being reshaped by what you've lost, but not destroyed by it. Shalom, shalom.